Hey guys, it's me, Brandy, with just a quick note before the episode starts. I had this one locked and loaded before the pandemic happened, and I just want to mention that number one, spoiler alert, but no one dies in this episode. I don't know that our nervous systems could handle it otherwise. And number two, the things that my guest talks about today are actually quite fitting for the moment. She talks about going through the unimaginable, which is similar to where we're at now. So some of her insights about how the unimaginable changes her habits, her marriage, her outlook, the way she advocates for herself and kids are things we can suddenly all relate to in a new way. Okay, now back to your regularly scheduled pre-pandemic episode.
Mom, today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom! It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Hi, Adult Conversation podcast listeners. See that? I changed up my intro line by one word. I'm creative. In today's episode, you will learn from the bravery and hard-earned wisdom of my guest, who also happens to be one of my closest friends, like we were at each other's births kind of friends. Mary tells us all about how she handled the unimaginable, a cancer diagnosis for her son. Full disclosure, there are a few breakdown moments in here, but also we laugh so much, my God, especially at the beginning and then at the end when she reminds me of one of the funniest moments we had together that I had completely forgotten about. We also talk about that one time she betrayed me, how her son's diagnosis completely changed the way I parent, and a Britney Spears moment we shared when we both lived in Santa Monica. Mary also talks about how her son's health emergency affected her marriage, which part of her life she had to completely put on hold, and her advice for any parent going through a medical crisis, and their friends who want to help but don't know what to say or do. Mary was a self-proclaimed crunchy mom before her son got sick, and she gets real about how she had to lose her crispiness in order to save her son. I know you are going to love her as much as I do. Friendly reminder, my book, Adult Conversation, a Novel, is available for pre-order. It's a darkly comedic novel about the relentlessness of modern motherhood. Find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, and in stores starting May 5th. For more info on that and upcoming summer book signing events in Las Vegas, Denver, and Los Angeles and Orange County, California, check out my website at adultconversation.com. On to the show. Today on the podcast, we have one of my best friends, Mary. I don't even know how to lead you in on this because we have so much. One of the things that I want to tell people about you is we've been there for each other. Oh my God, I'm going to get emotional. It's fucking like we are not even 15 seconds in. We have been there for each other through some of our most vulnerable moments. So I was at two of your births. Mm-hmm. And you were at one of my births. Mm-hmm. So we didn't come here to talk about births today, although we could have a whole other podcast on that.
We could.
We came to talk about your son and a health crisis that you guys went through with your son when he got cancer. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I have to say is being at your second birth. So your first son is named Luke, and he's the one who had cancer. Mm-hmm. Being at the birth of your second child, I remember we just laugh at the weirdest shit together. So I remember this moment when you were about to give birth. It was like the baby was crowning, everything was happening, and I was holding Luke. He was like 3 at the time, and he had
not
chocolate.
fully clothed.
Yeah, he probably had a bare ass. I'm assuming.
I think
so. So I remember holding him, watching this whole miraculous scene happen, and he was eating a chocolate, like a piece of chocolate, and your baby was coming out, and I'm like, look, Luke, it's your brother, he's here, and he just looks at me and goes, can I have more chocolate? And I was like, kids are savage. Like that moment to me just summed up how developmentally appropriate, but
Sure.
self-centered kids are.
Yeah.
I love that moment for so many reasons. He was like, yeah, my mom's pushing out a baby. Like,
No big deal.
Do you have any more sugar?
I think he asked me if he could have my chocolate too in that moment. Do you remember that?
No.
I feel like he asked me that. Can I have your chocolate? Or I heard it and it,
If that isn't motherhood in a nutshell, like I'm pushing out a fucking other human and you're asking me for sweets.
something. Yeah. For my chocolate, by the way. Yeah. That was for me.
Oh my God. Okay. So I have to ask you, and I know you're nervous to answer this question. What do you think the listeners need to know about you?
Well, I guess probably that I had all those home births.
Yes.
Since you brought it up, probably that I had 3 home births and that I also miscarried at home. That was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
I would say more brutal than having a baby at the end.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah. So interesting piece about your home births is I had never been to a birth before, but then we met and you asked me if I would be labor support at your birth, and I wasn't even a doula yet. So you are the one that got me into this realm. But one of the funny parts of it is I got pregnant maybe, it's like 6 months to a year later. And I was totally going to give birth at a hospital. In fact, I was romanticizing about it, and for the stupidest fucking reason, the Cabbage Patch Kid Hospital.
Right, the tags.
Yes, like the tags and Babyland General. Wasn't that the name? Like I had this whole idea that when you give birth at a hospital, you get the name tag on your baby's arm and you have the blankets. Like there was this whole Americanized version that I had in my head. And so I thought it was great that you did the home birth, and being there really opened my eyes to like, this can happen and like everybody doesn't die. That's amazing. And you were so strong and it was really beautiful. So then when I got pregnant, I was like, oh yeah, that was great, but I'm going to do a hospital. And then I started asking some of the questions about choices I could have during labor. And then I started to realize, oh, there aren't as many choices and there isn't as much freedom when you're in the hospital. So I then decided I was going to do a birth center, and then I ended up having a home birth. That's right. But I remember this moment, and I tell everybody in my childbirth classes about this. I remember this moment where I looked at myself in the mirror during transition because it was fucking hard, right?
I remember. I was there.
And I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought in my head, Brandy, when did you become this tree-hugging hippie? Like you used to eat Slim Jims. Like where did we go wrong? Yeah. And then, so I was just mad at myself. Like, why am I not with an epidural? Why am I not? This is terrible. And then I got into the birthing tub. And I remember looking at you and you were like very angelic and just like strong and there for me. And I remember looking up at you and thinking inside, I don't think I said it. Fuck you. You have betrayed me and lied to me. This is bullshit.
This is so hard.
Yeah. So, and then
F you.
Oh my phone. And then after that, I remember the midwife saying, oh, how was your experience? Would you do that again? And I was like, I'm never doing this again, much less at home. Never. But then as time passed, it softened. And then there were some really beautiful things about it that I loved. And I felt so strong having done that. And then my second child was a cesarean with a whole bunch of complications and things, which I'll probably be doing a podcast on that whole thing. But so yeah, I just felt like people needed to know that moment where I felt very betrayed by you, but also deeply supported by you. So, and I wanted to add to that, what people need to know about you, I think. The beauty that is Mary.
Oh my gosh.
You're like,
where are we going with this?
What is coming? The beauty that is Mary is that you are one of the crunchiest, most enlightened, most compassionate, sweetest people I have ever met.
Wow.
And yet you love smut magazine.
Yes.
So
Lainey gossip.
and remember when you were in labor with Luke, you were just reading people. We were reading People magazine, and that's when we knew things were picking up because you could no longer
deal with it,
ingest the smut,
couldn't take it. Yeah.
So this is what I love about you: is you're both things.
Thank you.
You are grounded and also in the air. I mean, you're both things, and I just love that balance about you. So
thanks.
Yeah, I feel like people needed
That's
to know
an
that.
honor. Wow. I would never have confessed that I love gossipy magazines. I mean, we drove by that hospital to see Britney Spears, remember? Should I not have said that?
No,
remember?
say it.
We drove around, I think it was St. John's, because we lived up there.
It was UCLA Santa Monica.
Yes.
Yeah, Britney Spears gave birth there, and we
Right.
both lived in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
And we drove by and remember even back in the day, I was like a fighter for justice because did I yell out the window?
Yes.
I did. I couldn't remember if it was in my head or if I did. Leave her alone.
Yes, you did.
We were all like birthing advocates, just like, this is a woman's space. It's privacy.
Yelling at the paparazzi. And we were just circling, trying to see.
So this is the thing is we were both things. We were in one moment trying to advocate for her privacy and also completely exploiting it for
Totally.
ourselves.
That's terrible.
See?
That's awful.
Sorry, Brittany. I also...
Big fans.
Yeah, big fans of yours. I also almost did that when Michael Jackson died. But I didn't.
I can't believe you didn't.
I know. I think the only reason I didn't is because I heard the traffic was crazy, but we're close to that hospital.
Yes.
I almost put my son in the car and was like, I just have to be near his being.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. But
I
now
don't
it's all
blame you.
controversial. Now I'm like not allowed to love him anymore. And I
still don't
understand.
blame you. I understand too.
Thank you. So obviously we could talk about a variety of topics here today, and for days really. And, you know, we have been sounding boards and confidants to each other for years. But, you know, today we're here to talk about this life-changing experience that you went through. It's
Sure.
basically every parent's worst nightmare.
That's
so
true.
I'm sure the listeners are like, oh shit, I don't want to listen to this. This is going to scare me. But I have to believe, and I know from your experience, that there were... I don't want to diminish it by saying there were gifts of your hardship, but there are things that you learned that I think other people could benefit from. So if people out there are like, oh man, this might be heavy. Yeah, it might be heavy, but obviously you can tell we have great senses of humor. We laugh a lot.
Yeah.
So will you tell us your story? I don't even know where.
Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with balls.
When he was born? Oh, no. Okay.
Born.
When we noticed how big they are?
Yeah.
When a baby's born?
Oh my God, baby boy balls.
Huge.
Okay.
3 times.
When that thing, when the thing happened at school to his balls.
Sure. Okay. So Luke was in 4th grade and he was punched in the balls by a fellow classmate. And that too started like our journey to, you know, advocate more for, hey, we don't touch each other like this. Hey, you know, we need to be more disciplined and, you know, come down. We can't let kids do this to each other, right? Even though I know boys, they might do things like that.
Right.
But what happened is that Luke's balls got really swollen. God, sorry, kids. His scrotum got really swollen and, you know, we just thought, okay, it's swelling. It'll go down. We went to the doctor. They thought maybe he was losing a testicle. We went to the ER. They thought he just had, I can't remember the word for it, but basically swelling and it was going to just, you know, go through the lymph nodes and just release itself and be fine. So they gave us a lot of Tylenol and then he started missing school more and he couldn't, you know, was having a hard time walking and we couldn't really understand what was going on. So we're trying all these natural remedies, all this stuff and, you know, calling the doctor and they said he just needs more Tylenol or codeine and they gave us a prescription for that. And we felt really bad, FYI, about giving him Tylenol and all this stuff. I felt horrible about it, but he was in pain. So how could we, we couldn't say no. So we're giving this to him and it wasn't working. And I'll never forget that he woke up one morning and his back was swollen. And this might sound totally nuts, but I had a vision of my dad, who's deceased, in my face. And he was giving me a look of frustration. And I knew something was really wrong. And I told my husband, you have to take Luke to the ER right now. Something's wrong. And so they went to the ER and, you know, later that night, because they were in the ER for a long time. And then later my husband called me and he said, they're admitting us to oncology.
Oh, I get the chills.
Me too. I know. I know. And so I asked my neighbor to come stay with, I have 2 other younger kids and one was 3 and one was 7. So my neighbor came up and stayed with my kids and I went to the hospital and Jeff came home. And that was like our first night, and Luke was in so much pain. I'll never forget. You think, your kid is faking it or something, but they're writhing in pain, and you think, oh, how can it be that bad? And then you feel horrible because I've talked to other parents whose kids are in the hospital, and they think, oh, he's not really in pain, but they are, and they have to get all this medication and morphine and things like that just to control the pain. And
did you believe, when you heard the word oncology, did you believe, oh, this is cancer? Or did you, like, this could be cancer? Or did you think, oh, they probably have it wrong? I mean, that's so extreme.
I think I was just in shock.
Yeah.
And so when I went to the hospital, I was just in shock. My dad had just died 5 months earlier from cancer. So I'd spent all this time in the hospital with him. So I had unfortunately, a lot of experience and knowledge about all of that. He also had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So it was really familiar. Yeah. And that's really uncomfortable. Yeah. But I think I was just in shock, and I got there, and you just have no idea what to expect. It's my baby, which is totally different than watching my dad pass,
right.
because he was an adult, but this is my baby that I'm responsible for. And in the hospital, your responsibility ends, and they're taking care of your child.
Right.
So just getting there, and he was in so much pain and dealing with, oh my God, they have to give him morphine, and we're going to do a spinal tap, and we've got to figure out what kind of cancer he has, what's wrong. They need to start steroids right away. He had lymph nodes that were so swollen in his abdomen that they were blocking blood flow.
Wow.
He had a collapsed lung. Who knew?
Shit, dude.
Right?
That's so gnarly.
Yeah. So just dealing with, okay, I've got to understand what's happening, befriend these nurses because they're going to take care of us, So I had to be like all of it, understand, get the information, deal with the shock, and be friendly to the nurses. And I'll be honest, like 50 people come in your room every day. And when the psychologist came in, I thought, oh my God, I have to be like normal.
Oh God, right?
Because what are they going to write down about me? I was terrified of like, are they going to judge me? And how are they going to?
Right. And does this woman need further counseling, or is she fit?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. God, that's so heavy.
It was terrifying. Yeah.
So how did you cope with all of that? Was it just you had to do it and so you did it?
Mm-hmm. Or I think so.
Yeah.
Or what? What were you going to say?
I don't know. Or was there something else? Were you consciously like, okay, I'm going to breathe through this. Did you use any of the techniques that you use in life to sort of regulate emotions or clear away energy or any of that kind of stuff?
I'm sure totally unconsciously I was just deep breathing, and God, I was just in shock. And you have to just keep going. There's so much adrenaline because you can't stop. There is no stopping, and having to go into meetings to learn what kind of cancer they think you have and how they're going to treat it. Here's what you can choose. You can be on a study. You can use the standard of care of chemo. Plus, if you choose a study, there's an oral medication. There are 2 different ones, and you don't get to choose which one because you'd be in this study. And we're trying to see if these oral chemo will make a difference added to the standard of care. One of them had decent side effects. The other one of the side effects was death. So I said, no, we cannot do that study because we can't choose.
That's like just playing lab experiment with your kid.
Yes, on your kids.
Oh,
that happens. It's not the first time that they asked us to be in a study. So we said no to that, but just having to think about that.
Yes.
And you're terrified, and you're making decisions for your child's healthcare, and you have no idea what's going to happen.
When the doctors gave you suggestions, advice, was it like, these are your choices, or was it like, here's what you should do?
No, they said, here are your choices. Think about it. And my little sister is a doctor. So she was on on a conference call while we were all together. So she could be there and give me advice, thank goodness. And if you're ever in a crisis, if you have a family member who's in medical, you're so lucky because they know what to ask. So she was so helpful. But they gave us a couple minutes to think, and we didn't really have to think. We just said absolutely not. But our oncologist said, in France, they do standard of care plus this one oral chemo that had the more decent side effects. And he wanted us to do that. So he gave us that option of, I will call the drug company and see if they will fund this for you. So we said, okay, we will try that. And that's what we did. And he was really in favor of that. And I trusted him. He was an expert in lymphoma.
So this was a different option that wasn't a study. It was something that had already been.
He just offered us because he thought that was going to give our son the best chance.
Wow.
Was also using this particular oral chemo on top of the standard of care.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I thought I remembered that there was a time when you guys were, and I feel like it was like maybe the first night that it happened, I think, or maybe the second night that we were messaging or something, where they had brought up chemo and you guys were like, we're not going to do chemo. And then something changed.
Oh, well.
Am I remembering that right or not?
No, I mean, we knew that we would have to do that. That's not something that we would ever want to do because we are totally, crunchy, like you said. So that's not something we would ever want to do. But, and I'd watched my dad have it on off and on for 20 years with his own battle, right? So I had seen really horrible side effects for my dad. So of course I'm so scared. You don't want that to happen to your kid, and you're the one taking care of them when you leave the hospital. But there's no way that you cannot do chemo.
Right.
Okay? If you walk into a hospital and your child has cancer, you can't leave the hospital. That's a non-negotiable.
So what was the process like for you of letting go the way that you live your life and the foods you eat, like everything's organic, and there was a time where you were raw vegan, and so you're really thoughtful about what you put into your body. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, was it just, we don't have a choice, this is life or death? Or did you have to have a moment of conflict or struggle internally?
Well, I do feel like, and this was going through my head too the whole time, chemo can save lives and chemo can kill. Chemo saves and kills. So that just kept going through my mind. But I wanted to add in extra things. And they kept saying too, during that meeting we had where they gave us the options, and they kept saying, we're really open to other modalities, because they knew that that's how we were. So I said, great. I felt like that's awesome. That must have meant something, right? So when I brought in like astragalus and other things that have shown to be helpful during that process, they said, no, we don't want him taking vitamins. We don't want you giving him anything, because we have no idea if it will affect chemo. We have no idea. There are no studies. They never study that. So that was, oh my God, I was so devastated. Like, oh my God, I can't do anything to help my child while we're in this process. And when you go on chemo, there's so many things, 4 to 5 chemo drugs during a visit. Yeah. So over 5 or 6 days, plus added things, Bactrim, all these things that could prevent getting an infection, like pneumonia, could prevent nausea. So there are a lot of medications on top of the chemo.
So you just felt like there was this whole tool set that you weren't allowed to use.
Right.
And who knows, maybe that's rightfully so, because of the possible interaction. So not saying that was on, the doctors shouldn't have taken that stance, but just personally for you to not be able to do anything to help boost his immune system or help him detox or any of those things had to feel really hard.
Yeah, that's like getting the rug pulled out from under you. And it finally sunk in at some point. I am giving my control and responsibility to them for that time my son's in the hospital. That was so hard. I think that was one of the hardest things, besides watching him, suffer with the side effects. But he ended up doing really well at some point. I think toward the end of he had 6 rounds, and so I think it was after the 4th he started to do better.
And how long was he in the hospital for?
At the beginning, almost 3 weeks.
Okay. And then he came home, and then it was the oral chemo that you had to do. And then I forget, did you have to go and get what was your hospital home life like?
Sure. So after the 3 weeks, that's when he was out of pain and swelling was down enough, and he was walking, because he was not able to walk when we went in. So we had to go through physical therapy and make sure he could walk before we could go home. The other thing too is that we had to make sure that his body was strong enough to withstand more chemotherapy, because we'd go in for a week at a time to receive chemotherapy and stay in the hospital.
That's right. That's what I'm remembering.
Yeah. And he also had a couple blood transfusions. Those take 4 hours. So we'd have to go in sometimes for that. Like if all of a sudden he looked terrible, he was lethargic, his face was white. We just had to monitor all of his blood work too. It was so many things, and all of our focus completely on him. And before we left the hospital the first time, we had to have another meeting with a nurse, and she basically told us we had to change our entire life to take care of him because there were so many things he couldn't do, right? He couldn't go to the park. He couldn't do monkey bars. They'd put a port in his chest. So we had to be really careful about that. No rough play, no horseplay with the siblings.
Oh my gosh. They were like, what? We're used to pounding on each other.
Exactly. So I thought, as she's telling me this, I'm just thinking inside like, well, how am I supposed to live? How are my kids supposed to interact with each other if they can't monkey around, right?
They know no other way.
And then she told us too that we'd have to wash our clothes every night. Just think, as a mom, you've got all these kids and your husband goes to work. Well, his clothes have got to be cleaned.
Wow.
You go to the hospital or you go to school, you go to the store, you have to come home, you have to wash your clothes, everybody's clothes. I'm still in that cycle of washing clothes every night. It hasn't left. It got so ingrained in order to keep the house germ free. Then I did all these wipes. I took wipes from the hospital. I'll be honest. They have, heavy duty, kill everything wipes. So I just took the tub home. And
so you still do laundry every night now?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Oh, those things that linger with us from something like that. Yeah.
I don't know if that was worse than hearing that your child has cancer, but just how much when they make it so obvious how much you have to change your life to make your home safe for your child.
How did you even handle the fear of your other kids going to school and bringing home germs? We all know kids in school, especially the 3-year-old. Well, he wasn't really in school at that time.
School.
Okay, that was probably a saving grace for that, had he been in preschool or kindergarten. But we know how many colds happen, and this was in winter, right? Wasn't he diagnosed in November?
Yeah.
So how did you not freak out about that, or did you?
I did. I'm sure that's, part of why I was so stressed about making sure that the laundry got done and I wiped every surface down, and God, it was really stressful.
Yeah. So then after he went through the treatments, then what happened? When did you know things were getting better? And then how is he doing now? And what was that process like coming out of it?
Let's see. I remember he had come home the first time, and maybe, I can't remember if his hair fell out his second round or his third round, but I remember it was still there, and we thought, oh my God, maybe he won't lose his hair. That's so naive, because of course, and he did like a week later.
How did he handle that?
Yeah.
Was that really hard for him at that age? Did he care?
He was really scared of how it would happen and what he would look like. And, our school community was amazing during that time. And they held a head shaving party at school. So we FaceTimed during the head shaving party. They had it after school, and a bunch of kids lined up, and a lovely mom at school shaved people's heads, including her daughters. Her daughter lined up to get her head shaved. So
awesome.
I think that was super helpful. And then we shaved Luke's head.
Yeah.
Right after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that helped so much. I'm getting emotional. Yeah.
I know, right?
That helped. And then he wore hats, and people made hats, and it was not a big deal after, like, once we got it done. Yeah. But it was, I think, before, like, oh my God, what's it going to look like? This is going to make him look so sick. We're going to go to the store. People are going to stare. But we just did it. I mean, you have no choice. So
it's the visual representation of what you're dealing with.
My kid is sick.
Right.
Yeah. And then it's so weird, because you go through something so traumatic, and it's such a big deal, and you've got the physical representation. I looked like hell. I would go to the store, and I just remember walking in, and this guy's like, "Are you okay?" I think I was ordering a pizza. This guy's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, my son's in the hospital." And he started crying, and I started crying.
God.
Then to go through something like that, and now he's totally fine. And now you would never know if you saw him. His hair is so thick and gorgeous, right? It grew in like this amazing color, and we went through something so rough, and now we're on the other side. And
I have so many questions for you about that.
You know about that too.
I do know about that, but first of all, your experience changed my way of thinking about things. Because you guys were the most non-toxic family. You did everything quote unquote right in terms of keeping your body safe and healthy.
True.
And even mentally, the way that you parent so compassionately, it was like you did all the things right. And then your son gets fucking cancer. It's
I know.
So then your son gets cancer. And it really opened my eyes up and let me off of a hook of getting it right.
Yeah.
because like that's fucking bullshit.
Totally.
Like, and there's all these things as you get older that validate for you that, hey, life isn't fair.
Mm-hmm.
And then this for me was in parenting wise, like a big one. So like maybe I don't stress about the Cheetos that my kids are eating every once in a while. Maybe I don't freak out about video games every once in a while. I don't know. And maybe that's a leap, but I'm wondering for you, did that let you off any kind of hook for parenting? Did you change how you parented after that because of it? Because there was no formula like A plus B is supposed to equal C, but then no, it doesn't.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally emotional right now, but it's totally true because I felt like, you can do everything right and you can still get a really fucked up diagnosis or disease or whatever, a life or death situation that you have to handle. So now, he wants to eat Cheetos and he wants to, because he's a teenager, he wants to go down to the gas station and buy all this crap and drink pop soda.
Wherever your location
Midwest,
is.
Yeah. And yeah, I had to let everything go. I had to let so much go. Like I said, I had to let go of all that control, which is the worst for any parent, is to let go of control, right? So I had to let go of that. Although during the hospital, we gave him bone broth. We brought in green juice. We did all these things, smoothies and breast milk. And he didn't know that. Breast milk and smoothies, we just did so many things that we could food-wise to help keep his body strong. But now it's like, oh God, okay. You want to eat those Cheetos? Okay, fine. Yeah, that's not going to kill you. I mean, C's candy. Okay, sure. Things I would never have ever given them before. Now it's like, well, shit, why not just live? Okay, sure. Do it. Just do it. Because there's no guarantee. There are no guarantees. And I think that's the worst thing, is that there are no guarantees.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying, but it's the truth.
And also why not just live?
Why not just live?
The micromanaging of all of the things. And then at the end of the day, what things actually matter? Is it every little thing we put in our body? And it's hard to tell because we could be saying this and that could lead to somebody's cancer in another way. Yeah. So it's like that's right. It's just there's no right answer and we can't know.
Yeah. And it's like it's not your fault. I think that I probably definitely would have thought and did think, fuck, what the fuck did I do to bring this on for my kid? Did I do something? Did I do something wrong? Could I have done something better? I know that was going in my mind, but no.
I know. Well, that's the thing that's interesting is because of the way that you guys lived, there's actually, no, you couldn't have because you were doing all of those things already. Yeah. So somebody was like, well, they sure ate a lot of junk food or whatever, whatever people
judgy
think.
Shit.
Yeah. Judgy shit that whatever
I may have done too, but.
But now you know better. Yeah, but you didn't do any of that. So then it's like, oh shit. This just happens.
This is fucking life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Life's unfair. Yeah.
Damn.
I know.
What else from this has changed in your life? So you do laundry every night. That's like a remnant from being in the hospital. You're more lax about what your kids eat and how they live. What else? What else has stuck with you from this?
Oh, yeah. Well, we were not eating any meat too before. And then when you're on steroids, you want salty food, and my son would turn into kind of slightly like the Hulk and get kind of ragey. But we started eating meat. He started craving meat. And so I started cooking for him and eating it myself. And that's totally different. But that's been a good thing. Other things I think is the good things that came from it. And I feel super lucky to even say that there were good things that came from that. Like I know that because he's alive, right? And that's lucky. But we did experience so much love and, oh my God, so much compassion and so much support from strangers, from our school community. Our families were incredible. We got so much love from the whole thing. And I was just going through boxes and someone sent this humongous box of hats and I still have them. I haven't done anything with them, but we just received all these random gifts and people sent us money and letters like, oh, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. Our family's thinking of you. Oh my God. That was incredible. Yeah. And my son, he felt all that love too, and he got visitors in the hospital. And it was a huge learning experience for the kids too.
Yeah. Will you tell me a little bit about that? How is
what
Luke?
Part?
Any parts, but how is Luke different? After having gone through it, what do you think the kids learned through it? What were the hard parts? What were the parts that the benefits, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, my son, he'd had like a hard time before. And I think he's a person that's hard on himself in general. It's just that born that way. I remember he said, God, I didn't know people loved me so much. So that gave him a more positive outlook. Plus, he was one of the healthier kids. And let me just say that every time we went in for treatment, all the rooms were full. I think there were 52 beds. They were always full. Sometimes we would have roommates. So he saw these other kids and he knew he was in a better place.
Wow.
And he would say, oh my God, I don't want to die. Life is worth living. And he had been so hard on himself earlier. So this was a huge change in perspective for him. That's such a big perspective for a 10-year-old.
For sure.
I think that was really good for him. But that's a terrible place to be to get that perspective.
The maturity that must come from that. Seeing, your innocence is lost.
Yeah.
In a way when you see all of that and when you're faced with, might I die?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
What about the other boys? I just remember visiting
they were so
you.
little.
I remember visiting you in the hospital, and I remember Felix was like playing on the other bed and like jumping and had cards and was like getting into all this stuff. Just the wrangling that you had to do on top of all that you were already doing.
That was late too. That was like at 8:00 at night. That was a really long day. Well, Felix was so little. So he was 3. So he just had to go with the flow. He didn't even question it, right? We would just, it's time to go to the hospital. My husband and I would take shifts, sleeping over every other night. One of us would be there every other night. And then when it was flu season, then my husband actually stayed a couple times for the entire week, which is brutal to never leave the hospital.
Yeah.
But, I remember I had to basically farm them out. Friends came to take them, thank God, take them for a week. It was the first time I'd ever been away from my 3-year-old for, a week. That was pretty rough. I think they just went with the flow. I know parts of it were really scary for them, but they didn't really have the words to express it. So we've talked about it now that they're older. So who knows how that's affected them and how that might come out later. But,
right.
They visited him a lot and we stayed pretty close.
So how did this affect your marriage? In what ways did it change that? I mean, 2 people going through a hardship have different coping skills, different communication styles, maybe different ways that they do things. I would imagine that that's a trial on your marriage as well.
But not until we were out from it, at least for us. But I remember one of the nurses saying to me, this is going to make or break your marriage, so you better have date nights. I was like, oh, okay. Well, all right. Thanks for the tips, right? I became really good friends with all the wonderful nurses. Thank you. But I wish she'd said that to my husband, okay? Because she said it to me, right? I was there. What if someone had said that to my husband?
Whoa.
Instead of me or both of us? Like, why is all the responsibility on me to make sure we have date nights on top of fucking everything else? The laundry, the food.
Wow.
Everything. Making sure that my other kids were picked, like one of them was picked up from school. The other one had someone with them. It was so much just to make sure everyone was in a safe place.
The logistics of it.
The logistics. So, but we got through it. You know what I mean? You're in that
survival mode,
survival mode, and you just have to make it and get through it. And I thought things were good. And I thought, oh my God, this is great. Like, I kind of like those crazy, intense experiences where you grow, like you grow together. This is life, is bad stuff happens. And bad stuff had never happened before, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. Until my dad died. and then 5 months later, my son's in the hospital. So all this stuff back to back for me, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm growing as a person. Like, we're getting stronger. Those are those times where people talk about, I came through it and all that. But after we were all done with treatment and we were more in the clear, I said to my husband, I said, oh my gosh, I think this has made us closer, don't you? And he said, no.
Oh, wow.
I know. I know later I said, what? Did you really mean that? He's like, no, I don't even know what I was saying. But he was processing everything. Like, it obliterated his sense of safety completely.
For sure. Wow.
It was hard for him because he had to go to work. And he had time off, and then he went back to work, and then he'd spend time in the hospital and work from the hospital. All of that, I didn't have to do that. I just had to make sure everything kept going. But he was trying to juggle work. And at one point, his employer said, I think you need to recommit yourself to your job. So I'm sure he was thinking, fuck you, you know?
Right.
My child I have to be there for him because we don't know. Legally, you have to be there in the hospital. You can't leave your kid.
No.
Anyway, so.
And I wonder too, as women generally, you had friends that you were talking to about this. You were probably processing a lot of your feelings and had a support network that was specific for you and people asking how you're doing. And
very much.
You could unload. And I don't know that a lot of men have that same support. And so maybe maybe he wasn't talking to anybody. So when you asked him that question, he hadn't processed it to the point to even realize that something like this could bring people closer. Right? Like maybe he was at the beginning of the processing, which is like, this is bad, where you haven't gone through some of the deeper meanings of the things yet.
Also, I mean, and I'm talking to you from, 3 years out of, the end of treatment. I think that we were maybe 6 months out of treatment at that point, but we both went through some PTSD and he would bring it up. Finally, he got it that he was experiencing, extreme fear and stress and responding differently because he was still in that, fight or flight, that adrenaline mode, survival mode. And for him, making sure that we had money and could stay in our place and all of that it's a very different stress than I dealt with because I was just assuming that we had all that covered, right?
Yeah, that sense of safety being broken. That's such a huge thing to
That's
lose.
heartbreaking.
Yeah. Especially if his role or how he sees himself as like the protector, provider of the family, like that's his job.
Right.
And then if it's like, well, shit, I can do my job the best I can and it can all be taken from me. Like
it's awful.
Awful.
Yeah. And now just talking to you, I'm thinking, God, the dudes, the men, the husbands and the fathers, they need someone to talk to because they don't talk the way we talk.
Yeah.
I mean, I could cry when you came into the hospital and I just started sobbing, Yeah. But he doesn't get to do that.
Was there anything when the psychologist would come in the rotations in the hospital, would they talk to him too? Or did they only talk to you?
They probably were there when he was there. But I will tell you, I did not want to talk to the psychologist. Last person I wanted to talk to, she doesn't have kids.
Oh,
she's still in school. Do you know what I mean?
I don't blame you.
20-something years old. Why would I unload my stuff on someone like that who has never experienced something like this? How could she understand? She can't understand. Some of the nurses who'd been there for a long time, they were amazing. All of the nurses were amazing. But the ones who'd been there for a long time, they were there for me. I could unload anything to some of them and they were amazing.
They weren't just nurses. They were like mentors almost, it sounded like.
Yeah. They were the counselors. Yeah.
So what did you learn about the medical system that surprised you?
Well, what I can definitely say for sure is that it is a pretty well-oiled machine. Everyone kind of knows their place. And I would see little squabbles where someone seemed to kind of step out of their place or make another suggestion and other people didn't like that. I personally see that as not a good thing. Teamwork, that's not teamwork.
Sure.
But they too are in crisis mode and they're trying to save 52 children's lives every day in the hospital. So I don't want to say anything bad toward them for that because they are locked into their mode of thinking. And this is the way we know how to save a life. This is the best way we have. And if they go outside of that, I think it's just too much.
Right. This is probably the way that they know to get the best results.
They do. Yeah. So that's what I mean. It's a really well-oiled machine by that.
Can we talk about the time when they messed up the chemo meds and almost killed your son?
Right. Well-oiled machine, right?
Yeah. The one time it wasn't?
Yeah. That might have been after the third round. And we went home. Luke was doing really well. He was at home and we had to give him the oral chemo twice a day. So we picked it up. It was nighttime and we opened it up and it looked different. And then we looked at the label and it was totally different. It was a much stronger dose, probably for an older, like a teen or like a 20-year-old. And we looked at each other and I'm just so glad we have to call right away. Because what if we had just said, maybe they changed it on us, right? But the thing is about if you're in the hospital or if your family is, you need to ask a million questions.
Yes, the advocacy that you have to do for yourself is, it's overwhelming. It's every little thing.
It is. Because they're people.
They're human. Yeah.
They're human. So we called and the nurse said, I am driving to your house right now. She drove down, picked it up, and gave us the right one and apologized profusely and then took off. So yeah, you have to understand, you have to be on the ball. This is so draining to be in that, fight or flight, but you have to know everything that's going on.
Looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently or something you wished you'd known that you didn't know?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's anything I could have prepared for or known before, but except I'd gone through all that preparation, being there with my dad and going through everything with him, because we did ask a lot of questions. And I have, a sister who's a nurse and a sister that's a doctor. So they were there. They had all the questions. I learned a lot from them, what to ask, how to ask it, what's available for you to ask. Right. People don't know. I knew only because of that you can ask questions. And my sister would have to tell me all the time, you're so nice. And they're not going to be mad at you if you ask questions. But, the patients that do the best ask the most questions. So she would have to kind of, push me a little bit. But yeah, you have to, I guess, I don't know if it's get a thicker skin or just try not to be embarrassed or feel bad, but you need to know what's going on with your kid, and it's your right to ask questions. Right. They might say no. Like I asked one time, I asked this nurse, I think we only had her once, and Luke was throwing up. They were giving the meds. I just asked her to move the meds to a different time. It was like an 8-hour shift that they would have the meds going, 8 hours in between. And it seemed like he needed them a little closer together. So I asked, and she was the only nurse that was strange. She would stare at me. She was weird. And she said no, but she didn't offer any explanation. And I didn't really understand. And I just had such a weird vibe. I didn't even want to ask. And I don't really understand because he was suffering and did need the meds closer together. And she wouldn't even ask. So, but I let that go because I knew we could get through the next 8 hours and she'd be gone. And I could ask the next nurse.
Yeah. And hopefully have a compassionate answer. Right.
Well, and then we did. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to wait.
So then when you asked that next nurse, did she switch it for you? So that's wild.
Yes.
How that works.
Yeah. It's important to know your nurses and be friendly with them if you're ever put in that position.
And this goes for birth too.
Yes.
When people say, I've had a great experience at this hospital or whatever, and somebody else says, I didn't, is the unknown aspect of it is that you don't know which care provider, which nurses are going to be there that day. And depending on how long your birth lasts, if you have a nurse like that who's just a no on everything, and that's who's there for your entire birth, that's a different experience than maybe one of these nurses that's a little bit more kind or creative or resourceful. And you can't control how that's going to go down. So sometimes when people in birth would say, oh, I love my doctor. My doctor's so great. It's like, yeah, but your doctor comes in at the very end.
Right.
So how do we prepare for what it might look like if you have to deal with somebody who's providing care that isn't being respectful or listening to you or whatever?
Right.
That's a hard lesson to learn, especially for personality types that tend to be polite and not want to upset things and be friendly and all of that.
Like me.
Yeah. But I mean, I also think you're good at sticking up for what you need in the moment. I've seen you do it. And I mean, and maybe that was a catalyst for it, but
for sure. Or made it stronger, Yeah. Yeah. And then, turning 40
and not giving a fuck anymore.
You just can't take shit anymore. Yeah. I don't have time for this. That's something too, is that like when my dad was dying, I thought, oh my God, like life is so short. You don't have time to let someone be a jerk to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You've told us a couple things about what this has taught you about life, and I was curious if there was anything else you wanted to add to that. Like, what clarity came from this experience? Was there anything else that you just all of a sudden knew in a different way or became really clear to you after having gone through this? Like, did this affect your work or the path of your career?
Yeah. Yes. Well, one, I think that crystal clear that life is way too short to dick around, and you better, get it together and do what you enjoy doing and be honest with yourself and be honest with other people. I just think there is no other time. This is it,
Yeah.
But yeah, after my dad passed, I applied to grad school for the third time, and I thought, okay, now I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to get my master's in social work. I've always wanted to do that. So I applied again to USC and I got in, but I got the news I got in the first week we were in the hospital with Luke. And I remember we had a social worker, and I was looking to him for advice, and I was still in that, like, everything's going to be okay. I had no idea what to expect with treatment and how long it was going to feel and all the bumps, because he did get several infections from antibiotics and things. And we had to go back into the hospital several times in between treatment. So I had no idea that was coming. I had no idea what life was going to be like.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd even had that meeting where the nurse said, you're going to have to do laundry every day, right? So I didn't know. And I remember looking at the social worker, and I told him that I had just gotten into USC. This was a huge dream of mine. And he gave me the nicest smile. And he's like, well, you can always apply later. I was like, what are you saying? I can't handle this? He's like, it's just going to be so much work. So I deferred for a year to handle. And I'm so glad I did, because there's no way I could have handled. I literally had no idea what this ride was going to be like. And it was harder than I thought and worse. It was so all encompassing. I couldn't give attention to anything else at all.
How did you ever have a moment where it wasn't on your mind or you
Never.
weren't dealing with it?
Never.
Did that never happen?
Never. I'd go home because it'd be my turn to go home, and Jeff would be at the hospital, and I'd be doing puzzles with my two little ones and just only be thinking about Luke, and I wasn't there to see everything. And, I was hoping that my husband was asking the right questions or getting all the information. That was really hard to let go of that.
When you sometimes feel like you can't send your husband to the store to get the right yogurt, you're like, I'm going to give you all the details about which yogurt to buy.
Yeah.
And if they can't buy the right yogurt, it's like, how on earth can they ask the right questions about the medicines and the chemos and the side effects and the benefits and the risks and the alternatives and all of the different things? That would be hard. Did you have a conversation with him that was like, here's what I want you to ask. I want you to hit these marks every time. Anytime they suggest something, I want you to ask certain questions. Did you have to train him on that, or was he pretty good about it?
Well, so I think I would be a little bit more, I guess I'd be better at advocacy, just put it like that. But there were a few things that happened early on. I remember he threw up, and he didn't throw up often, right? But he threw up one time, and just the fellow was there.
And you're talking about Luke throwing up, right?
Talking about Luke throwing up in the hospital. I think it was at the very beginning. And he'd only done it a couple times. Anyway, he threw up, and the fellow was there, who was not necessarily his oncologist, but he's there studying. So he's kind of a different position. He's not a nurse, And it wasn't traumatizing. It was just, kids throw up, okay? So we got it cleaned up and everything. And the fellow said, we need to give him this drug, Atrazan, something like that. It was an antidepressant. And I said, well, what is that for?
Was it Ativan?
Ativan. Thank you. Ativan. And he wanted to give him that. And I looked at him and I said, what is that for? He's like, well, it's an antidepressant, but it helps with nausea. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. No, thank you. Please don't do that. And he said, okay. But what if I hadn't been there, or my husband? What if my husband had been like, sure, okay, that might help him. But I knew that wasn't necessary. I said, he just vomited. That's all.
What?
Yeah. I know that he was uncomfortable.
Sure.
And I know that he wanted my son to be okay and not throw up again.
Right. But he had a positive intention.
He did. But it was such a big thing to throw at a body that's taking so many meds already.
Right.
I just thought that was crazy. So I let my husband know, hey, FYI, if they ever want to do that, say no. So we are on the same page, and there were just things he wouldn't remember. Oh, I don't remember what they said. Oh my God. Oh my God. Just want to bang my head on the wall a couple times. But generally that went pretty well.
I know that that's a thing, that when you get results from a doctor or you're in a conversation with one, a meeting, that when you leave, you can be like, I don't remember anything.
Yes.
So one of the things that I do is I do my voice recorder on my phone when I'm in meetings like that, because you're in the moment where you're getting the information and some of it's not pleasant. And then you're trying to think about what they're saying, and then you lose half of it.
You're just trying to understand and think and process. You're right. And then you forget.
Yeah. So for anybody out there who feels like they go to doctor's appointments and can't remember anything, you just go to that little app on your phone and do the voice recorder.
Yeah. Take notes.
Yes.
You have to.
But sometimes even the taking of the notes, it's like it pulls you away from
hearing
the thing. But
back to your question, I ended up starting grad school a year later. And it was so exciting. I mean, I was like, oh, I'm a person. I'm a person in school. This is so exciting. And like, I'm talking to teachers. I'm a person. I'm not just me, a mom.
Caretaker.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, it was so cool. But then, I couldn't hack it. I could not freaking hack all those papers. It was so rough.
I mean, you had 3 kids.
I know. What was I? I know.
Well, no, I don't mean to say like, what were you thinking? But just to validate, this is one of those things that had you not tried it, you probably would have always gone, I should have tried it because bet I could have done it. So the fact that you tried it, you got the information that this is too hard. But trying to juggle that whole other thing on top of all the parenting that you were doing and the kids and everything had to be overwhelming.
It was so overwhelming. Yeah, it was so overwhelming. And nothing changed to make it easier for me to be a student. You know what I mean? I still had all the childcare, and my son was still at a place where I was still focusing so much on him, worrying about him and giving him medication and making sure, he had his supplements and lining things up and doing the laundry and taking them to school, helping with homework. Crazy making.
Right.
So then to do school on top of it in my off hours.
Yeah,
in quotes.
Right.
Totally quoting.
I think I remember you asking me, do you think I can do it? And I think I said to you, because at some point, I don't know if I had written my book or was writing it during that time, but I knew what it felt like to try to add some other huge project onto your schedule. And I think I said to you, the only way it's going to be possible is if you have childcare, because these aren't things that you can just fit in off time, because that doesn't exist. But you would have to actually have somebody doing your job as mom, so that you can use that time to do something else. But even that is so hard. I mean, financially, after you're paying for school, to even have the means to do that. But then also the flakiness of babysitters. It's not consistent
real
care. Oh my gosh.
So real.
So real.
Oh my God. I've experienced too much flakiness. And I think was I a flaky babysitter?
Yeah, we all were. I think about the same thing. I think about how, when I was younger, it was like, oh, my friends want to go hang out at the mall. Oh, I can't do it today. I'm sick or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you just bail and you don't realize that you've left this person totally in the lurch.
It's awful, right?
We
had no idea.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to other families or other parents going through a health crisis like this?
Assemble your team, ask for help, tell people that you're going through it. Let them know that you are on the brink of going crazy. We were so lucky with our community because we'd been at our school for a few years and I'd done a lot of volunteer work there. I knew a lot of people. I would come home and people would be doing dishes in my kitchen.
Like random people?
People I know from school, but they would just come in and they would have cleaned my house.
Wow.
People brought us meals. I mean, that's the one that you cannot cook. You have no brain space or time to devote to that. So you've got to ask people and You've got to ask people to take your kid. But also I think if you're in that situation, it's going to be okay. You're going to get what you need if you ask, I think, for the most part. But I really feel like for other people on the other side that are watching their friend in distress or can be there to help, just don't judge people. Do you know what I mean? I'm thinking about friends that are there to help out during those times. It's important that they know what to say. Nobody knows what to say when you're going, when their friend is going through a health crisis. Am I making sense?
Yeah. So what things, that's the thing that's so tricky.
Yeah, it is.
And
everyone's this is different.
And this is the trap that people fall into, is they are scared they're going to say something wrong. So they say nothing at all.
Right.
So from your point of view, are there any tips or guidelines for what people should or shouldn't say? Like, what did you find the most helpful and supportive?
Even if someone, just call them. Text them, because if they can't get back to you, they won't. Don't take it personally. Don't take anything personally, FYI. But just call them and say, I don't even know what to say, but I'm here for you. As simple as that. I have no idea what to say. I'm so upset for you. It could be something like that.
Right.
Or, fuck, are you okay? What can I do for you?
Yeah,
anything like that.
Yeah, those are pretty safe bets.
Can I bring you coffee? Can I bring wine to the hospital? So, not really, but people would bring us all sorts of things to the hospital and it was always welcome and we were so grateful. I think never say anything like, well, if you hadn't done XYZ.
Oh, God.
Or if you had just done this and this. Never say that.
If you're a person who would say that, just
don't.
Just take your fist and just move it kind of close to your face, and then just like really swiftly punch yourself in the fucking face.
Jam your hand in your mouth. Yeah, just don't talk. Don't say it.
Mm-hmm. Did people do that to you?
So, yeah, a couple people did. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we also got like the friends who wouldn't call because they didn't want to bother us. Don't just call. Just call, because I guarantee you I would rather have seen that you called than hear that you didn't want to bother me. Because it's not going to bother me. What bothers me is that you didn't want to call because you're uncomfortable.
Right.
Which is understandable.
Right.
But still just call. Just call, just text, send a letter. That's important to let people know that you're there for them. It's just such an uncomfortable thing when someone is in pain or suffering and you don't know what to do.
Right.
So I understand that, but you know, suck it up.
Right. And also
Suck
with texting, you don't even have to like call and talk to the person. You can send a text.
Yeah.
That's what can I do for you?
Yeah. I don't mean to sound bitchy, you know, but it's just
Mary. You don't sound bitchy at all.
Thanks.
That's a normal thing.
Yeah.
That's reasonable. In terms of food, people making you food versus bringing you takeout or gift cards for takeout, what did you prefer? Because sometimes it seems like if people are like, I want to make you something for dinner, it can be even more work to talk that person through what your eating preferences are, what people in your family don't like, especially if you have kids who are picky. And so I've noticed that times that I've offered to make people food, it doesn't go anywhere. And I think that's part of it.
For sure.
So now my usual go-to is, where's your favorite place to eat, and then get gift cards for it.
There are a few people that just took on that responsibility, and we just said, okay, this is what we eat. This is where we love to eat, or this is where we like groceries from or takeout from, and someone else would do the work. So we were so lucky because, you know, you were so involved, and I have a couple other friends that were like the guardians of our little bubble, so that they were the go-between, and they would field those questions so that we didn't have to. So we just would say to them, you know, we like food from Chipotle or wherever. Yeah. You know, food from Mother's or whatever. And so that was easy. Sometimes people wanted to make things and they would text me and say, is this okay? And I'd say yes or no. But when you're sitting in the hospital, you've got so much time to text.
Yeah,
you know, you're just sitting there watching TV or, you know, whatever, while your kid's on their iPad or whatever they're doing.
That's such a good point, which is if we're going to reach out and say to people, hey, I want to make you this thing, maybe give options instead of what can I make you?
For sure. Be specific. Say, I want to make this. Is this okay? I can add in meat, take it out, whatever.
Right.
Be specific so that your friend doesn't have to think.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the mental work. Like they're already having to micromanage things, and then they're also having to meal plan. Even though the person's making it, it can just be a lot.
Yeah. And oh my God, we're so grateful to receive that. Like if you do that for someone, they're going to be so grateful. You know, whether they can express it or not.
Right.
They're going to feel so thrilled that even that you care to do that.
I read something when I was in the hospital for 2 months, and I read this article that was so helpful, and I wondered if this resonated with you, but it was a drawing of a bunch of circles. So there was like the middle circle and then a ring around it and then a ring around it. So it kind of looked like a bullseye. And the theory was the person who'd been through it had been through cancer. And she was talking about how when you're going through a crisis, that sometimes people will dump their stuff on you and you're the one going through the crisis, right? So she has this theory that you start in the middle and the people going through the crisis are the dot in the center. And then every ring out of that are the people closer. So then there's your husband and your kids. And then out from that is probably grandparents and then friends. And so the theory is that you dump outward, support inward. So what that means is if you look in the hierarchy of the ring and you've got something that you're questioning or you're unsure of, or you think somebody should have done something different, or you're really scared about something, if you're on the grandparents' ring, you wouldn't dump that inward.
Right.
You would only dump that outward to your friends.
Right. Yes.
And that makes so much sense. And I found that to be so helpful for my experience too, because people think that they're showing their concern for you when you're in these things, but when they're having a meltdown about your situation to you, and then you are caretaking them about your situation.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. So I love that. Dump outward, support inward.
Yes, 100%. I know. I'll never forget when you said that. All I can think of is at my dad's funeral. We had 2 funerals, right? And at his first one, a family friend came up to me and I was fine. We'd been through the ringer. We're at the funeral. We're here to celebrate his life, and I had my kids with me. I'm holding it together. And a friend of his came up to me and was just sobbing and like, he shouldn't have gone. It wasn't his time. He didn't need to go. And I remember saying, oh, I didn't know what the hell to say. I didn't know what to say to him because he's dumping it on me. And, I know I was there when he died, man. I know. Right. But I think I said, well, it was peaceful. I know, but it was peaceful when he passed. Well, those are just platitudes. I'm like,
dude,
yeah,
get the fuck out of here.
I know. I love him so much, but it's like, I can't take your stuff right now. I've got to be here for his funeral.
I love that you were consoling him and he was like, don't console me like this. Are you serious?
So nuts. Yeah. So nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then that definitely happened a couple times when Luke was in the hospital. And, what are you going to do when people do that to you?
I mean, people are human.
They are, yeah. And they're upset.
And it makes you realize when you're the one going through it, oh shit, how many times have I done this? And I can remember one specific time I did this so terribly to a friend of mine I know who was going through cancer when we were in acting school. I remember I was at her house and I was helping her get all of her medical bills in a binder because she was having to organize all of this. And I remember sitting there and I don't know what came over me, but I said to her, like, what if you die? Like we were having this moment, we were talking about things. And she kind of looked at me and was like, I don't know. And
right.
So I have carried that moment with me on I wish
so mortified.
I could undo that moment. And I don't know if I've ever told her. I've meant to tell her. And I don't know if
telling her.
Ever really have. Yeah. I feel like I need to reach out to her specifically because I'm sure she'll remember that. But again, it's like the flaky babysitter thing. Yeah. When you're in it and somebody does that to you, you have a little bit of compassion because you're like, I've
done this too.
But here's a guideline that's helpful to hopefully not do that to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dump out, support in.
God.
Ding.
Ding.
TM. I guess the only thing I would ask is in the beginning, it sounded like you were just dealing with the survival mode and the adrenaline. Mm-hmm. And then as things mellowed out a little bit, did you find different coping strategies that you had never had to use before? How did you deal with coming home and living this life? Was there anything that you relied on or anything that helped you, whether it's healthy or unhealthy?
Oh my God. I think there are a few, what do I really want to tell you? Yeah, for sure. I started drinking I did not drink at all, except for in college. But yeah, I remember, and this is back again when my dad was sick. One of my sisters made margaritas. I'm like, oh, it was so amazing and fun to get tipsy again. And I started drinking wine so much more. I never did that before. So I don't really do that very much now, but it was like a, what would you call it? Like a sedative. Okay. Like a sedative. Yeah.
Sure. And I can imagine that if you don't have any moments away from this huge crisis and you have something that softens that a little bit, I can imagine that would feel like at least some sort of...
Yeah.
Something?
Yeah. I mean, and I have 3 kids. So yeah, definitely that was something that I relied on. I also used CBD oil. And, there was that one time I had too much and that was...
Oh my God. That's what you were talking... I forgot about that.
FYI, I've never done drugs in my life. Like I have such a phobia and I think it's just not for me, right? I've never wanted to do that. But we were using CBD when my son was out of the hospital in place of his anti-nausea meds with incredible results. And I could see it would reduce his anxiety because he'd get stressed. He was nervous when we got home. Was he going to start throwing up?
Yeah.
So when he would come home, it was like, oh my God, I'm home now. Now what? He would just be in bed in the hospital and everyone would take care of him. So coming home was just a little different because of all the siblings and all this just normal life going on. So I could see he would be really anxious about what to expect and am I going to throw up and all those, it wasn't quiet like it was in the hospital. He loved that aspect. He loved going because everyone took care of him and he was the center of attention. Okay. So it was, learning curve when we would get home, but we started giving him CBD oil. It's legal. And it would almost immediately take effect and I could see him just calm and he wouldn't throw up. I mean, just a couple times, I think he threw up, once outside Whole Foods and once right by school. So anyway, but I started taking it too because I could see how calm he was. So I'm always such a calm person, but this really
tested you.
Yes. Yeah. And, my mind was just racing and it was, oh my God. So I would take a little bit, and I'm talking the tiniest drop, but one time, I took way too much on accident. Okay.
Yeah, what? Oh,
it was a syringe.
And then Luke came up while you were doing it, right?
Yeah. And squeezed it and it just exploded in my mouth. So it was under my tongue. There was so much, like a huge, at least a teaspoon, if not more. And that's a lot. So I remember just trying to scoop it out of my mouth to get rid of it because it tastes bad. And then 2 hours later,
did you call me or text me?
I called you probably several times. I called several people. I left all these messages for people. I thought I was dying. I thought I was having a heart attack. And I'm walking outside in a circle without my shoes on. And my kid, 2 of my children are home.
Before we knew what was happening, it was super scary because I remember you being like, my heart feels like it's racing and I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I'm having a heart attack. And I was super worried about you. Yeah. And so I think I left to come over.
You did.
And then when I came over and you said to me, Jeff's on his way home from work, but I made him stop by the grocery store because I want ice cream so bad. I was like, oh, this is what this is. And then I had to try to persuade you that you were not having a heart attack, that you were high.
Yes. I was going to call an ambulance, okay? I would have been that person. I would have been that mom.
And then you were outside in the Greenbelt area, walking in circles. But there was something, what was it? There was something funny you were saying. I wish I had video of this moment, but there were things you were like, gosh, it was like you were tripping out, you know?
Yeah.
But it was in my mind, so clearly a pot related incident, but you had no frame of reference for it. So everything you were saying it's almost like you were like, I just really want to listen to the Grateful Dead and I want to get a cheese pizza and isn't life so amazing? Like you were checking all the boxes for high person, but you didn't believe it that was happening.
I was so embarrassed too because I knew I was saying things and I couldn't control it. I was mortified and I was freaking terrified that someone would find out.
Right.
Oh, that was,
Thank you for that reminder.
That was
I had
hilarious.
forgotten about that moment.
Yeah. That is something I can laugh about now. But in the moment, I was just horrified that I had done that to myself and so embarrassed because my kids saw. So we still laugh about that. Luke will say, remember that time that you were acting weird? That's,
And how good was that ice cream when Jeff brought it to
Oh my
me?
God, I ate the entire thing and then I got in the bath. It was great.
Oh my God.
Terrible. I don't know why people do it. That's what I was thinking in my head. But I know my experience was weird. Yeah. I tried a lot of things. We did a lot of alternative things when we could.
Yeah, you were really good you were like a shaman of sorts, or like an apothecary. You had your own
my own apothecary.
Yeah, you had your own ideas about things that you'd researched about that people had done trials on with cancer. And so you were doing this whole other regimen that I think really had something to do with how great he did and how quickly his cancer dissolved.
Thanks. Yeah. Oh, I feel like it really helped rebuild him, back to, I think he's even healthier now than he was before, just from implementing all the different things we did and eating differently too. And so we're almost 4 years out from when my dad died. So also almost 4 years out from Luke's diagnosis. And I finally feel now like, okay, I'm back to myself, whatever that means.
Wow.
It just took so long.
Yeah, you've been through the ringer for sure. It's so crazy to think about how innocent we were. I think about you and I before we became mothers. And where were we at? What was our gym called? Bodies in Motion. Hanging out in the
hot tub.
In the hot tub.
Yeah.
Probably talking about hot celebrity dudes or something like that.
Or dishing on how crazy Tom Cruise seemed,
Yes. That was a topic of that era. And then to think none of us had any idea that you would be dealing with a kid with cancer.
No.
Yeah, life is savage and it's also beautiful. It's all of the things. And you never know what's going to be dropped in your lap.
You never know. It's don't judge people. You have no idea. I say that coming from someone who definitely, would have had thoughts about doing chemotherapy or anything like that.
Yeah. So do you think before this, had you known somebody who had cancer and went through chemo, that there might have been a part of you that's like, oh, they should try other things?
For sure. For sure. You have no idea. Yeah, for sure. But that's like totally being immature and naive and not having that life experience or understanding of, oh my God, no one's going to escape life,
Okay, so Mary's the best. There's that. And you can find her online. She works with women by using hypnosis. Her website is maryscalise.com. That's MARYSCALISE.com. And you can also find her on Facebook. She has a passion for working with women and mothers to help them get clarity, feel grounded and calm, lovable, confident, peaceful, and present. And for anyone near St. Louis, Missouri, she is also presenting at the Heartland Hypnosis Conference there on April 26th. I want to say that I truly hope that none of you have to navigate what Mary did, but I just know that life doesn't quite work that way. So for those of you who are in her shoes, I hope this helped in some way. And I think some of the major insights and lessons she learned along the way and shared with us here are applicable for all of us in any kind of crisis. Hey, hi. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating, or better yet, a review. As always, thanks for listening.